It takes energy. It takes courage. It takes commitment. A hunger to live life at another level. A life of true fulfillment. Welcome to the Extraordinary Living Podcast, where Jackie Senatori interviews leading experts from around the world, extracting their wisdom, giving you the tools, tips, and tricks on how to go from ordinary to extraordinary. Get ready to start living a healthier and more empowered life. Here she is, your host, Jackie Senatori.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's show. I'm so happy that you've joined me because today is a really special episode. I'm going to be interviewing author MJ Ryan, who is the author of the book we'll be talking about today, which is How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For. So before we jump in and get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of context of what this book is about. Any unexpected change, even one you've longed for, like a sudden new job offer, may surprise you with anxious thoughts and fears of what the future may hold. And an unanticipated negative change, like the loss of a job, a breakup of a long-term relationship, can really rock your boat. These are the times when we feel a frightening loss of control over our lives, providing an opening for negative emotions like regret, denial, hopelessness to take over, preventing us from moving forward. Well, for MJ Ryan, who is a best-selling self-help author and a thinking partner who has helped countless individuals get their lives back on track, those feelings are the sinkholes of change. You have to climb out of it, but how? Well, in How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For, MJ Ryan provides a solid 4-part game plan for doing just that. How to accept your new reality, thoroughly exploring all your available options, and taking concrete, measurable steps towards regaining control. The always compassionate MJ Ryan doesn't downplay your fear or pain. As she discloses, she in her own life has undergone some big unasked for changes. Such things like a divorce, the loss of a business she built from scratch, so she knows how tough things can be. But she also sees the path forward, one that will transform you into a change master, able to adapt to whatever, without warning, life throws your way. So if this sounds good to you, I really do believe that this episode is for everybody. We all go through unasked for change, and we all can use the tips and tools that MJ is going to share with us on today's episode. MJ has worked as an executive coach for the past 19 years, working with everyone from founders of one-person startups, family businesses, and executives in C-suites of global corporations. Currently, she is the lead coach for SheEO, a new crowdsourcing, philanthropy, and mentoring organization supporting women-owned startups in Canada, the U.S., Australia, and New Zealand. The founder and former CEO of Canary Press, she is one of the creators of the best-selling Random Acts of Kindness series and the author of 8 books, including Radical Generosity, Habit Changers, Attitudes and Gratitudes, The Happiness Makeover, and The Power of Patience. Articles on her work have appeared in the New York Times, U.S. Today, The Wall Street Journal, HuffPost, Forbes.com, Good Housekeeping, Yoga Journal, and many other publications and websites. So without further ado, let's welcome MJ Ryan to the show. Hi, MJ.
Hi, Jackie.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to be with you.
I'm so honored you said yes to being on the show, and I'm so excited. So thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I've become such a huge fan of yours in the past few weeks. I sort of am living and reading all of your books. I happened to come across your book that we're going to be talking about today, How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For. Sort of by accident during this beginning of the quarantine, I brought my son into Barnes & Noble and he was reading books and I sort of saw your title and grabbed it. And it's one of those moments where you realize this book was meant for me to pick it up. It was speaking to exactly of what I've just been through for a while and the audience that I'm serving and coaching, which is women going through change, particularly change they didn't ask for. So I just wanted to start off a little bit with a background on you and where you're from.
Yeah. So I'm originally from the East Coast, but I've lived outside of San Francisco for many decades now. So I'm a West Coast person now.
That's nice. I actually lived in San Francisco too. It's beautiful there. Where did you live on the East Coast?
Outside of Boston. I grew up And I went to Cornell, upstate New York, which drove me to go find better weather.
Right? I'm in upstate New York. I understand for sure. So I wanted to know what brought you to become a writer. Did you always know that you were going to become a writer?
No, I never imagined being a writer. I actually was an editor. So I have been a development editor, so helping writers create articles and books for, I don't know, I probably did it for 30, 35 years. And along the way, about halfway through, the guy I was living with said, let's start a book publishing company. And so you can edit books. And I'm like, we don't have any money. We don't know what we're doing. He was fundamentally an entrepreneur. He said, oh, we can figure it out. So we did the classic, put everything on your credit card kind of a thing. And we were successful with our very first book, which was about divorce. It's a well-known book called Coming Apart, about why relationships end and how to live through the ending of yours. A friend of mine wrote it. And we published it, and it was very successful. She was on Oprah. I mean, it was like everything that could possibly be good happened. So now all of a sudden we had a publishing company. So I started, again, just editing books, and then accidentally started writing because it was a way to make more money. So there was no such thing as VCs and investment capital at the time, or at least not for the stuff we were doing. And so one of the ways that we capitalized the press was writing books ourselves, as well as publishing other people's books, because then we didn't have to pay royalties. So we got to fund the money back into the press. And so we did this little book called Random Acts of Kindness, which turned into this huge, giant, multi-million seller and a whole movement that still exists in the world. And so I had put that together, and I started, it sent me on a personal journey about how to get happier in life. Like at the time I was just about to be 40, and I knew why I was miserable, but I didn't know how to be happy. And so practicing Random Acts of Kindness actually made me happier. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, what else could I do? And then I started studying and practicing gratitude and generosity, other forms besides Random Acts of Kindness. So I started to study and practice what now is the school of positive psychology, essentially. But I'm not my background is in psychology, but I'm not a therapist and I'm not a scientist. But I studied myself and I practiced on myself. And then once I started doing the work I do now, and I sold my press and working with people, I also work with lots of people around these things. And I just found how to get happier. Right. And so then I started writing about it, because I wanted to learn how to do these things myself. So
it's so good. Well, I'm very thankful that you did, and with that, you have such a unique, and I've shared this with you in an email to you. You have such an easily digestible way of writing that I think I've read dozens, if not into the hundreds, of personal growth, self-help books. And some of them, it's like you got to put them down after a couple of chapters because your head is full. Mm-hmm. And with this, How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For, even with Power of Patience, it was something that you just wanted to keep reading all afternoon. And a few of the things you mentioned, like the gratitude practices in there, it's like this one book, and it's not very big, had just so many different variety of wisdom and action steps that I kind of wrote you an email like, this is everything. It's all in one book. Like, it was just, it's so great. So I'm so happy that you ended up writing and coming out with these books. The one that I wanted to ask you, the Power of Patience one, and in particular, the Patience teaches us the power of receptivity. That was so profound in what we need to learn about life. I think you said in it, we can't change life when change happens with willpower. Sometimes we just have to have weight power.
Yes.
Is that part of kind of that learning at, you said almost 40, that you had to learn was about patience?
So, So I wrote about kindness, and I wrote about gratitude and generosity. And then I wrote about patience because it's the one thing that I'm still really working on myself. These other things I have really incorporated. I'm pretty darn good at being grateful and hopefully generous. But the patience thing is still an issue for me. Not with people as much. I'm pretty darn patient with people, but it's with stuff, broken systems, like waiting in, this is the old days problem, but waiting in line at a bank, or it's like, I think, come on, you can come up with a system where you wouldn't have to wait. So, or any mechanical object that I can't get to work. Like I was trying to Zoom with my friend yesterday. We were going to have a Zoom happy hour, the two of us.
Right.
And she couldn't get her Zoom to work, either the audio or the video. And so within 2 minutes, I was like, forget it. I'm just going to call you on the phone. It's like other people were like, okay, try it. Well, I couldnn't talk to her. But the point is that I get this. So I have really been interested in patience because I really want to grow it in myself. And I think that the concept of receptivity, and I think that when we're going through something, and I want to tie it into the issue of divorce, is that when we're going through a change that we didn't ask for, there's a whole emotional process that can be very painful, right? And it's the grief process. And we don't get to be in charge of the timing of that.
Right.
It's not like, there's certain things you can do that, but in reality, there's a whole piece of it that is just about time passing. And the patience it takes to go, I'm in this right now, and I know that someday I won't be, but but I have to just live through it. Basically, there's nothing magical I can do to make it go faster. So that requires patience. The guy that I started the book publishing company with, and I lived together for 14 years. And then one day when I was 40, this is all happened at the same time. He came to me and said, I'm not in love with you anymore. Here's your half of the house, but we'll stay in business together. So I went into therapy just, I guess, for support more than anything else.
Right.
And I remember the guy saying that it takes half as long to get over a relationship as the relationship was. So I thought, 7 years, like, oh my God. But the reality was, it was true. Not like I was in agony all that time, because I wasn't. But I noticed myself still being sad, and I met someone else and got married
right
right away, like within a year or two. So it wasn't like, but I still was going through this process, and I could feel my emotions like tapering off over time. And I can remember the day where I was sitting, where I was like, wow, I don't have any attachment to this anymore. But that was it was years later.
I loved one part in the book. I put a happy face. I drew a happy face beside it, that your friend Andy Briner came up to you. Mm-hmm. And when you were going through that divorce, and whispered to you that this is some new lucky guy's day.
Yeah.
What did you, I was curious at that moment to think, like, did you think like he was nuts? Were you excited?
Yeah, of course I did. I thought that was because I was absolutely positively sure that my relationship life was over, because that was the very year, and this is long before you were around, but that very spring that my breakup happened, there was on the cover of Newsweek magazine a story that said, if you're single at 40 and a female, you have as much chance of having another relationship, less of a chance of having a relationship than being struck by lightning. That was the cover of the magazine.
That's helpful.
Years later, it turns out that they said that wasn't true. It was false science and stuff. It wasn't even true. But at the time, it was like, yep. And I've never been struck by lightning, so this is it.
Right. Isn't it amazing if we only could peek ahead? I say this a lot when I had so much unasked for change. It was like, if I only could peek ahead just to see how it all turns out, I could have that patience of weight power.
I know, but you can't, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, but I had no idea at that time that I was going to meet somebody, and now in June we'll celebrate our 28th year of being together. So
that's so wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
It brings me to a part of your book where you talked about sometimes like shifting the perception on bad luck can really be good luck. So when you hear something like that, you're like, you just didn't know in that moment, that magazine cover. It's just like, well, it's got to have been good luck. You just needed to reorganize to.
Yeah, there's a famous Buddhist teaching story about that, which is it's all about time. So it's like there's a story where there's these herders and they get horses, wild horses come and they capture them, so they have horse, and then the neighbors all say, wow, amazing, you have these horses, and then the guy says, well, maybe yes, maybe no, it's great. It's good luck.
Right.
And then next thing that happens is the son riding the horse falls off and breaks his leg. All the neighbors say, oh, terrible, bad luck. And then the guy, the father says, maybe yes, maybe no. And then soldiers come and recruit all of the young boys to be in the army. But because his kid has a broken leg, he doesn't have to go, and like that. So you see how so now it's good luck
right.
because his son is safe. And so it's all about a perspective of time, right?
It really is. And you talk about it throughout the whole entire book of really showing examples of how every crisis has hidden blessings. We all have opportunity in these challenges. It's just making that muscle stronger each time we go through these unasked for change, knowing that you become stronger each time. It's not for nothing.
Yeah. The problem with the hidden blessing thing is it's true. And one of the qualities they found, the traits of people who are more resilient, is that they practice this belief that they're finding hidden blessings. And doing that helps us be more resilient. The challenge is that that's a very advanced, what I call spiritual graduate school, to be able to find the hidden blessing. Because when the thing is really terrible, when you've been just left and you didn't want this relationship to end, when your house burns down, when you're forced to live inside like we are now and you've lost your job, it's very hard to see what the hidden blessing could possibly be. And you want to say is F you, right? It's like,
right.
This is suffering because it, especially when other people try to help you by asking you to see the hidden blessing or telling you their hidden blessing, their interpretation of that, it's a minimizing of the true suffering, the true pain that you're going through. I mean, I don't know how much you've shared with your audience about some of the stuff that you've gone through. Like, you wouldn't want people to say, oh, look at the hidden blessing. It's like, no, it's really awful. And it is really awful. And so the question is, how do you can only come to it in your own time about seeing, and usually it's quite a long time later. You have to have perspective. You can't be in the throes of the agony.
So 2 questions. One, it was the patience part for me that was the hardest, of being like, okay, this is happening. How can I do A, B, and C to fix it? But it wasn't. It was like the new version of yourself. All the pieces that had to come in, like you said, just took time. The new friends that would show up. And over time, you would see, wow, this was kind of great that this happened. Too bad I couldn't go back a year ago and tell myself that when I hit the floor, like, I can't do this right now.
Yes.
But what would you tell people, like, the moment they get hit with the change, like their house burned down, like you said, or what do they do?
So I think that you have to, and the house burned down is a prayer, because this happened to my sister. So she's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. This is about, 10 years ago now. I get a phone call and she said, our house is burned down. We've lost everything except for the people and the pets, which of course is ultimately all that matters. But so it's just like any other loss. This is a loss. And there's grief attached to it. And so at the beginning, it's really about just receiving your feelings, right? And it's like other people saying, I'm so sorry. This is really hard. And it's saying to yourself, there's all these practice of self-compassion, which is about, this is really hard. It's painful. It's awful. Yeah, sucks. Terrible. So there's a grieving part of it that you have to give yourself space to do, and not try to force yourself into this other, what's the hidden blessing thing. But I think at some point, the first step, once you're willing to start looking beyond, is to say, and that you were referring to this, how have I gotten through hard things before?
Right.
What has happened to me so oftentimes this is not the first terrible thing we've ever dealt with. And when it is, it's the hardest one, because you don't know that you're going to get through it. The rest of us, when we've gone through a couple, you go, oh yeah, all right, I don't want to do this. I don't like it. It sucks, but I know that ultimately I will come out on the other side because I have every other time, right? And what did I do then before? What resources have I grown in my own in my mentally and emotionally and spiritually that can help me this time, right?
Right.
What did I count on the outside that helped me before? So the pattern that we've created in the past, we can be a little bit reassured that we are going to be able to, rely on that currently.
Or just even now having the awareness that even if you don't know, because you said like the first time when I got struck with Lyme disease, I had never had a health challenge. And like you just said, I had no idea was I going to make it through. Now it's like, if I can make it through that, I can make it through
anything. Exactly. And that's what happens. And so we're able to say, oh, okay, now I know how to do it. Right. I have a client whose husband died suddenly, and she, of course, was completely distraught in all of what you would imagine. And she had gone through a really serious health challenge previously with a child of hers. And she said, I think I can do this better because I know I've done something else like this that's hard and terrible. And I know how to do it, right? I know I can do it, right? But you also have this part that goes, why me again? Why is this happening to me again? Why do I get all of the terrible things?
I hear that from clients so much. I coach people, and one of the biggest things around divorce that I hear is just, why is this happening to me? It didn't happen to this person, or I'm getting hit one after another with things. And it seems like life goes in clusters. You talk about at 40, it just seems like, are we just meant to grow at this time that life wants to demolish us? But
I don't know the answer. I think some people get them metered out all through life. I think some people get more than their share. I think that I don't think that fairness exists. And when you look at some people's lives, you see that they've had more than their share of suffering, for sure. I think that one of the practices, though, again, that comes from Buddhism, is the recognition that just like you, millions of other people are going through this very thing right now. So to take comfort in that it isn't just you, that you are not alone, and the sense of not aloneness is helpful. It's an interesting contrast to Christian stories. So there's a story about the Buddha. A child dies. The mother comes to the Buddha and says, will you resurrect my child, basically? And he says, I will, if you can find me one household in this village that has not had terrible suffering.
Wow. Yeah.
And so she goes around and she talks to every person in her village, and she comes back and says, I understand. Right. And so
it's sad, but it's comforting. At my hardest days, I went through divorce court stuff for over 2 years. And on some of my hardest days, when people around me couldn't give me any advice because they hadn't been through anything like that, I would walk through one hallway of a hospital and be so thankful when I got off of that floor, that I could be outside with wind and freedom, that it put everything into perspective. It was.
Yes. Yeah. That's called it's called downward comparison. And actually it's a very important coping skill in change, is to be able to say, and I used to feel guilty about doing it because I think, I'm trying to raise myself on the back of other people's suffering. But It's really about saying, it helps you notice, it helps you notice the fundamental way to practice gratitude, which is shining the flashlight on what still is good and whole and happy and can be appreciated in your life. Yeah.
And get out of that why me
thing. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because why not you? It's just, unfortunately, we don't get to choose what happens in a lot of cases.
Why do you think some people, I've talked to a lot of people that have gone through divorce, and women that sometimes it was 20 years ago. Why do some people not get up and still feel broken 20 years later, whereas opposed to another person? Is it because of the method they do, or because of what they, the action steps you talk about in your book? Like, what would be?
Yeah. I think that some people get stuck in noticing what's wrong. And that then the more that you think about something, the more it gets deeply engrooved in your brain. So I had this amazing experience with this woman once. She called me up. She had read one of my books. She said, I want you to help me. She said, I'm miserable. I'm not happy because my husband had an affair and I can't get over it.
Right.
And I said, when did this happen? She said, 10 years ago. Okay. And then she said, And I said, what portion of the day do you think about this? And she said, 100% of my waking hours, I think about this. So I thought, okay, this is so deeply grooved in her brain that there's no way that I can magically, by any technique, have her not think about this, right? Because she's been obsessing. It became an obsessive thought that caused misery, right? So what I did is, it's a technique called containment. I said, okay, you get to think about this, but only a certain time of the day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What time do you want? Right. And so she told me the time, and I said, okay. And all the rest of the time, when you find yourself going there, distract yourself with something else and say, it's not yet 10 o'clock or whatever time it was that you picked. And so you can think about this, but only within these time frame from 10 to 10:15, let's say. And the rest of the time you have to distract yourself with other stuff. And it really worked because it gave her a place for it, but it didn't consume everything. And it also forced her to start doing other things besides thinking about it, which were truly distracting. And years later, I got this amazing email from her saying, I'm going out with friends every day. I've never been happier, like that. So even if you had a pattern of this for a very long time, you can change.
It's just helping you like get to the other side. Like once you make it over that hill, it seems you start seeing all like the good things in it, but it's just getting yourself back up to, I don't know if it's self-care. I mean, you have a really cute thing in the book that I loved about that gratitude rock, that when you have a gratitude rock in your pocket.
Yes.
Do you have like a little bit of, I don't want to say self-help things, but do you have like a little bit of self-care things that you do when you navigate something, bumps?
Well, that's hard. I always go back to the practice of gratitude. It's like, so yes, this is there. And so gratitude doesn't pretend that there isn't suffering, there isn't challenge, your life hasn't been turned upside down. But in this moment, what can I still appreciate? What can I still enjoy? And sometimes it's just that the sun is shining and it's coming through your window. Okay, so appreciate that. The more that we actually just add to whatever it is, that's, yes, this thing is being really hard and painful and difficult, and what can I still enjoy and appreciate? And what can I focus on? That I think is one of the best techniques I know for expanding beyond the suffering. It's called broaden and build. There's a theory in psychology that says when you focus on something positive, then you broaden and build from there into the new place, the new life.
Yeah, you had one of the tips you have in the back of your book, or close to the end, 20 tips of surviving change. And one of them was just that. It's like, if we focus on others, panic diminishes.
Yes.
So it was like, get out and do something for
someone else. Yeah. Right. And so now, because we can't get out physically, but we certainly, there's so much need, right? So we can still do wonderful things. Like the other day, everyone knows about Nextdoor. My Nextdoor, somebody posted a thing that said they were looking for buttons. They're sewing masks for hospital personnel, and they're looking for buttons because instead of having it around your ears, it's better if it's buttoned up on the side. And I had this jar of buttons for decades, and I kept thinking, what am I going to do with all these things? So I private messengered her, and she just literally lives like 4 houses down from me. So I said, I'm sanitizing the jar in my hands and I'm dropping it on your doorstep, which I did. And I can't tell you how much that helped me that day. It just gave me this uplift to help her, because she was doing something that was going to help others. And it was the minutest, ridiculous thing, but I still felt better.
Right. It was the button's turn to shine, right? Mm-hmm. I just think it's stuff like that like, I think I feel the best joy when I made somebody else's day better.
Yeah, exactly. So therefore, that's the thing that we can continue to do even when we're having to stick it in our houses, right?
What do you do with uncertainty, like specifically, I guess, financial uncertainty? And this can relate to now and women going through divorce. It's sort of like you have many stories in your book of women just being like, how am I going to survive?
Yep. And I don't want to minimize. So the part of what we're talking about is, we have a part of our brain that is tracking the potential threat to ourselves, right? And so it's called the amygdala, and it sits in the middle of our brain, and it turns on the stress response when it feels threatened. And one of the things that it's very sensitive to is uncertainty.
Right.
So right now we are living in tremendous uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen to us as a country. We don't know what's going to happen to us as individuals. We don't know and financial insecurity is a real piece of that, right? And so the amygdala can get very activated, and you can be in a sense of stress all the time, which is why these things that we're talking about positive practices like generosity and gratitude, they actually counterbalance the stress response. They bring down the stress response and up the relaxation response, give us a hit of feel-good hormones so we're not completely stressed out every second of every day. So that's why the practice of these positive emotions is one of the best things we can do for ourselves to live through uncertainty, right? Mm-hmm. And then, so that's on the emotional level, I would say. And on the practical level, it's really about figuring out, what can I do? You know, when I went through my breakup, I had been totally supported by this guy, and suddenly I wasn't. So the very first thing I did was get a roommate, right? Like, oh, bring in other people to help pay the expenses. It was like, and ironically, I've lived in many houses since then. But the only time I was forced to move was the time that we didn't buy something that had the ability to have a rental attached to it.
Right.
So that thing, which we now have at our place I've lived for over 20 years, it's been one of the things that have created financial certainty for me, right? So looking for how do you create, as an entrepreneur, there's completely unfinancial. So in my case, for instance, over the last couple of years, I started pivoting to working almost exclusively with startups, right, which is great, which I love because it's so complicated and difficult and impossible. And now, of course, they're failing. So my client base is completely drying up. My financial insecurity has gone sky high. But then I can say, okay, well, I still have this, I still have that. How do I make it? So it's about how do you create it? What resources do you have to work with to create some kind of ground of a sense of security for yourself, right?
And that's really great going forward that you took that crisis essentially and you made it kind of like, okay, how can I adapt? And now going forward, I have this rental. So it's like we learn these things through crisis.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and not everyone has a place that they can do that with or a room that they can rent, but what else can you do, right? What are the other possibilities? And we have to, that's the thing about expanding your thinking. First, you have to, the process of adapting is saying, this is really happening. And I got to get with the program of it happening. And so that's accepting that it's happening. And then how do I expand my thinking about how to deal with the actual circumstances of it and then get into action on those things. I got to cut down my discretionary budget because I don't have as much money. I have to, figure out how to move back in with my kid or whatever it is, right?
There is a hurdle definitely in accepting something's happening, even though you can see it happening, especially like I can say for something like divorce, it was like really wrapping your mind around this is happening and believing it is. And because it almost feels surreal sometimes when
totally. Yep.
It almost feels like a car accident and then it's just, what is my life? So it takes you a little bit to even get through that, to have clear thinking of action steps, right?
No question. That's why the process is simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
And the noticing of the change and then the dealing with, because this isn't just a mental process. This is an emotional process too, because every time we have a change that we didn't ask for, divorce is a perfect example. You weren't counting on getting divorced. You were counting on not getting divorced. That's why you married this person. And it was like, till death do you part. We all think that. We all believe that. If we didn't believe it, we wouldn't do it in the first place, right? And so when it doesn't work, especially if you're on the receiving end, it's not your choice, it's a death. It's a death of a relationship. It's a death of a dream. It's a death of a life that you thought you were having, that you were counting on having into the future, that's been taken away from you. And so the process, just the emotional process, forgetting dealing with the circumstantial stuff that you've got to deal with, but just the emotional process is a very heavy lift. But the good news is you don't, these things that you've grown are internal and you're never going to lose them. Right. And so that's the wonderful thing, is that's the gift, right? That's the hidden blessing, is that we grow in ways that we then have access to for the rest of our lives. And while we hope that we never have to go through anything as bad again, but we don't know, because there's many other things that can hit us with life.
You have this one part in the book that says, you grow wiser, you grow more resilient, and you have strengths for next time life knocks you down. So it's like a crisis doesn't go to waste. It strengthened a muscle. So the next time you're thrown about in this sea, I think you call it, of water, you have this whole box of, this is how I got back up. I'm stronger because of it. Really, like the first few times, or the first time that you really get blasted.
I wrote this book a while ago, and I think that if I were to redo it, I would add in this research that on self-compassion that has been just done, coming into the world in the last 5 years or so, which is that we have this reptilian brain that's the threat system, that's our amygdala, but we have this other part of our brain, which is the attached system. It comes from our primate past, which is, think about a monkey clinging on to its mother, right? It's this chest-to-chest connection that activates a feel-good hormone called oxytocin, which is the love hormone. It's the hormone you feel when you fall in love. When we're going through something really difficult, the more that we practice, so it turns out that that primate brain can't tell the difference between someone else hugging you and saying, you're going to be okay, Jackie, you can get through this, I believe in you, and if you do it for yourself. So the part of our brain doesn't differentiate. So when you put your hands on your heart, when you say kind things to yourself, this is being really hard, you can do it, just exactly what you'd say to a friend. Exactly. Then you activate this part that makes you feel better and makes you more able to go through the challenges. So it's one other technique that is very powerful. And if people want to learn more about it, look at selfcompassion.org.
Okay.
Kristen Neff, Neff, is the researcher and the founder, and she has all kinds of meditations there that you can do if you have trouble just doing it for yourself, and other kinds of techniques for it. To me, it's probably the reason I bring it up is because I'm dealing with so many people right now who are being really challenged. Right. The change they didn't ask for is risk to their business, and trying to make all their businesses work. And I'm just keep asking them to practice self-compassion, because the more that we're kind to ourselves, then the more we have access to our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking. We can then think more clearly about our situation, and we feel better.
it is. That's a hijack of emotion that blinds you a little bit from knowing what to do. That's why it's so much easier, I think, to solve other people's problems.
Of course, because you're not hijacked by your amygdala.
Right.
They are, but you're not. Yes.
It's like getting somebody else to read those court affidavits, because you can read it and you're so hijacked. You're like, I don't even know if I took in one thing that said.
You can't, because your brain, you probably were in freeze. And so you can't, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And you're in freeze. And so you literally can't process what you're reading. Yes.
I'm just a very big, or I was up until, learning the trust of timing and the trust of sometimes you just need to wait, was just tell me what the steps are. I will do it. I can stand I'm on my head for 2 hours if it's going to just move this along. And the pain of things sometimes, like the coronavirus, is you can't do anything. It's waiting.
We're just all waiting. That's right. Yep. It's true.
I feel like this book, even though you said you wrote it some time ago, is just something that even now, like, you could have it by your bedside table, you could just go back, because you have so many more exercises, the future self-talking exercise, and watching the movie. What would you tell the person in the movie to do? Mm-hmm. It's just jam-packed with so many things.
Yeah, I actually wrote it during the economic crisis of 2008. So it's been 12 years now. But but because of what's happening right now, it's very relevant again. I've been giving the same talks. All of a sudden, people are contacting me to do podcasts and give talks on webinars on resilience and stuff. So it's been resurrected.
It is. There was so many different teachings in here. You pick up things like gratitude and different things from different teachers. And I felt like all of them were in this book.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a magpie. I collect all these things and then I stick them all in books.
I think that is why your books are some of my favorites. It's literally like there's so much in this, and they're not long or hard to read. It's like a small book with just so much greatness in it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have just a quick question, just for like the rapid kind of question at the end to know. What would you say if somebody asked you if there was one person or event that really shaped your life?
So I guess what I would say is, I would answer that in a complex way. First, I'd say no, not one particular, because I feel like I try to learn and grow from everything that happens and all the people. I've had many people. I've had some amazing teachers who have shaped my life, and try to learn from all the stuff that I go through, both good and bad. And I also do think that there was this pivotal time around with the time I turned 40. Right, I broke up. I got married. I adopted a baby from China at 45 years old. My father died that same year. It was like, it sort of like within this 5 years was like this huge challenges and both good and bad. And then it's interesting. So I'm almost 70. So I've gotten to have a whole bunch of decades, and it's to see how much, different. There's a book called Chapters, which describes life as a series of, and this might be something that would be interesting for your readers to do, which is to say, if your life were a book, what have been the chapters of your life? And what would you call those chapters? And what would you want the next chapter to be called? And so it's a practice again of helping make the future come the way that you want it. So when I was turning 50, my friend, we were having dinner, and she said, well, what do you want your 50s? We had been doing this chapter thing together. And she said, well, what do you want your 50s, the chapter in your 50s to be called? And I said, Easy Does It. Because it's been pretty hard so far in my life for a variety of reasons. And it was the easiest decade I ever had.
Oh, good.
My kid was young, and it was so much fun, and my work was prospering. I didn't have to worry about money, which I had been worried about all the time up to that. So I'm a total convert to this process. So I encourage you to name your chapters.
I actually made a note. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going to do when we stop talking.
I'm thinking I should take my own advice. I need to figure out what my next chapter should be called.
Really? It's funny. I tell people sometimes that I'm like, what's next for me? I just want it to be really good. I deserve a really good 7 years.
So there you go. It's really good. That's going to be the chapter. All right.
I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing everything that you know, and for writing these books. I have a stack of them ready to go.
Oh my goodness, you really do. Thank you, Jackie.
I mean, they're so great, and they're all just things that you can take with you, that stay with you. And so thank you, MJ.
All right. Take good care.
Thanks for listening to the Extraordinary Living Podcast. For show notes for this episode and all past episodes, head over to JackieSenatori.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take care and be well.